Welcome to Scry Babies. I'm Louis Stardust.
I'm Tori the Vast.
Today we're joined by ComedIanMTG, who's going to introduce himself in a minute, but he's not going to right now because we have a featured patron.
That's right. Our featured patron is Mike from the UK. Thank you, Mike, for being a patron. It's patrons like you who make these episodes possible. If you want to become a patron, check out our link below.
I forgot to say what this episode was about because I was so excited. But you read the title because that's how YouTube works. We're going to be talking about the best decks for beginners and then a couple that might not be the best for beginners but also are really cool, so we're going to be talking about them. We did a video recently where we were talking about CEDH and how to get started. So this is kind of like a little follow-up video because all this information wouldn't fit in one video. It would be too much. We also talked about in that video how we're going to be at MagicCon Vegas. So if you want to come try out any of these decks, we should have them available for our meet and greet on Friday. We're doing a Learn to Play CEDH event. Myself, Ian, and Tori will be there throughout the day playing games with people. We do provide some decks to borrow. So if you want to try decks out, that's a good way to learn. And if you're already an experienced player, you can come play with us and a bunch of other cool CEDH content creators. But first, a word from our sponsors.
That TCG Player is your one-stop shop for all things TCGs. Whether you play Magic, Lorcana, Flesh and Blood, One Piece, whatever it is, you can get it there. From pre-cons to singles to play boosters, whatever you want.
We have the all-new Duskmourn, which is out, so you can get that over on TCG Player. You can also go pick up Foundations. I think those are the last two sets coming out this year, but there has been so much Magic. So if you've missed anything coming out this year, was Fallout this year?
Fallout was this year.
We had Fallout this year. Ravnica Remastered came out this year, if you remember. Oko was here, and OTJ this year. There's so many sets. So if you want to pick up any of those singles, pre-cons, like Tori mentioned, lots of new products, old products, all that good stuff. Check it out on TCG Player.
That's right. We also have the Haunted Bundle from Duskmourn. It looks like a little TV. It's very spooky, very cool. Contains some brand new things that we're going to talk about in the Duskmourn episode.
If you want to pick up any of the cool stuff we talk about in today's podcast, you can do so by checking out TCG Player. Thank you to TCG Player for sponsoring this episode.
We love you.
So for anybody who doesn't know who Ian is, I'm going to let him introduce himself real quick before we get into these decks.
Hey everybody, I'm Ian from the YouTube channel ComedIanMTG. I'm also a full-time CEDH grinder and coach. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. He does nothing else.
He is skilled and highly flavored. Favored.
Now I'm really going
No, that's
home.
not what I meant to say. I meant to say favorite. It's not a Dorito. All right. He's pretty skilled in CDH and knows a lot about these decks. And because he coaches, he talks about these decks a lot. So we thought it would be good to bring him on here. We're going to talk a little bit about what these decks do, how they win, the pros and cons, and yeah, just kind of go through them with you. So
First deck. Screaming. All right, we've got Tymna and Kraum, also known as Blue Farm. This deck means to take advantage of having two of the best card advantage commanders in the command zone. While it may look like a lot, like a Turbo Adnos style deck, it is actually best played as a mid-range or control list. Patiently gaining card advantage and waiting for a late game Underworld Breach is often the key to success. What I've been told is this is the vintage deck of CDH. Take it away.
she works so hard on that. So big question is, how do we win? I honestly think it's by getting out a nice Ristic study or something else that allows you to draw lots of cards. Your commanders also are really good draw engines, as Tori mentioned. So your Kraum gets in pretty good. He also lets you draw cards when people cast do spells, which
It's also
often
a
they
fucking
do.
4/4.
He's also a big,
Insane.
chunky, spicy boy. And Tymna also lets you draw cards, which is pretty good. So those are card draw engines, but of course we have things like Mystic Remora and, One Rings, I guess, if people play those and other stuff. But of course the Ristic is probably very, very strong in this deck. Of course, we also run Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, and Tainted Pack. We have Brain Feast, LED, Underworld Breach, all of the common CDH combos, the most well-known CDH combos. Am I missing anything from this deck, you would say?
Mnemonic Betrayal is often
was
run
thinking
as
that.
well. Yeah. That
Stupid.
usually take other people's win cons helps.
I hate that card. So Mean Bet is a thing as well. That's a very relevant card, and people tend to like it. And I hate it, so that's why we're saying it. So in your opinion, what would you say are some of the pros and cons of playing Tymna and Kraum?
I mean, it's one of the most consistent decks in the format for sure. I call it the free mulligan deck of the format because honestly, like 2 lands and a mana vault is a keepable hand because you just turn that into a turn 2 Kraum, and then if you hit a land drop at any time, which is super easy to do, it's a turn 3 Tymna to follow up, drawing multiple cards. On the other hand, that's the bad hands with the deck, and that's like in a situation where you mulligan to 3 cards, you can still keep a great hand, right? So it's a lot of the times, realistically, I've noticed a lot of the grinders have sort of settled into the pattern of I'm just gonna mulligan until I hit a Mystic Remora and like a mana rock, and then everyone will give me the game at some point. And that seems to work for some people. So
Yeah. I would say it has very efficient win cons. It's very easy to get through the deck and know what you're doing. Obviously, it has 2 of the best commanders in the format. You're playing all the good colors. Green isn't like the super strongest in there, right? So you don't really need it. And then it's just a very efficient deck, a very reliable and resistant deck. No, resilient deck. That's the word. Yes, resilient. Some of the cons, I would say that it is weak to heavy stacks.
yeah, some of the other weaknesses are Orcish Bowmasters can be a bit of a blowout, right? You go to resolve your Tymna triggers and someone flashes in Bowmasters and blows up your whole board. The other things is sometimes you can draw like the ritual half of your deck, so you can draw all of your Rite of Flames and Dark Rituals and stuff like that, and you expect to have your counterspells, and instead you're drawing those cards. So
It is good. I actually think whenever somebody from the constructed side of Magic wants to start playing Commander or wants to start playing like high power or CDH, this is usually the deck I tell those players to go to. It has a lot of the fun cards you already know, already love, and a lot of the play styles you're already used to. Now you just gotta learn how to politic.
And it's also just a good way, like, it kind of plays everything, all of the, like, basic win cons that you're going to see. Like, not all of them, but, like, a good majority of, like, you're going to get familiar with your Underworld Breach, your Thassa's Oracles, things like that. That's a good, like, here's everything for you. It's missing some other cool stuff. More fun stuff, but it's got stuff.
Who plays for fun?
Me.
All right, next up on our list, we have Najeela, the Blade Blossom. Najeela packs a punch! And with every attack, she brings out her army of fierce warriors. Najeela also offers a variety of options to win the game. With all 5 colors of the pie, you have a section. You have a selection of the best possible cards in CEDH.
I want to say that we are taking this very seriously and we are very sober. We're just really excited to talk about these primers that I wrote at like 2 a.m.
People are listening to this with their hands on 10 and 2. I gotta keep it spicy and fun.
That's true. They won't be falling asleep with this going on. Some pros of Najeela, which is really great, is she's 3 mana. 1 red and 2 colorless. Super easy. Get that Jewel Lotus out. She's out. She's very quick to come out on the field, so that means free interaction comes out really quickly, which is really nice. She's an army in a can, and if you run out of stuff to do with her, you could still go Najeela's
army in a can.
That's what Ian said, and that's what's sticking there. It's a thing. So if you do run out of like your win cons, you can just go for like full Najeela beats, or if you feel like you're not doing anything in time, still attacking with her, making warriors is already like a very good thing to have on the board. I also said what?
sorry, Najeela Beats is making me think of like a DJ. DJ Najeela Beats.
I hope that mod edits that in, please.
Yeah.
But I do think this deck is also good for beginners. It can feel overwhelming because it's so many colors. It's a 5-color deck. And I think it can be hard to figure out like which land you're tutoring for at that time, which is, I literally played it once on stream and I was like, ooh, I should have got a white mana instead, and somebody literally messaged me, was like, you were going for Derevi, and I was like, shut up, like, you know what I'm doing, because it's like really specific in colors. But the deck does everything. It plays I didn't put this on here, but it plays Thorkel stuff. It plays Underworld Breach stuff. It plays a really fun combo with Derevi, which is my favorite because I love that card. What else does it pack in there? You can
It
do other
depends
stuff.
on the version of it, but
Yeah.
usually the Thassa's Oracle and Adnaz and Underworld Breach and Derevi combos are the most consistent. Grim Hireling often is also found
Yeah, Grim Hireling.
because it allows you to convert your black rituals into an actual payoff.
What was Nature's? What was the one?
Nature's Lore used to be a card in the deck, but they have since the turboing of Najeela has been the sort of more proactive version of it.
Right, but if you didn't want to be turbo, you could play that even though it's not.
Yes, and so that is one thing I was going to say was one of the cons is that the modern version of Najeela tends to be a little bit more towards a Turbo Naz hybrid 5-color deck. And if you want more of that classic Najeela that's a little bit easier to learn on, you can definitely do a more mid-range version that's more focused on the creature combos and that can play a few more disruptive pieces as opposed, yeah, a little bit of stacks, right? Exactly, and use those pieces as opposed to just going all in, going beep beep.
What would you say some like negative cons are for her in general?
That was a
That was
con.
one? Yeah, yeah.
That was a con for sure. It's a little harder to learn, but the cons of the deck in general, the commander can be scary even if you're not. So I've had a lot of situations where I've been playing Najeela, and they're like, "Oh, well, if you tap out to like activate Najeela again, you could kill one player." And it's like, "Well, why would I tap out?" And so then people will just kill her because they get scared. Because sometimes when you look at 15 warriors, yeah, it's scary, right? So it has a bit of a PR problem basically. The other issues is sometimes you draw like the wrong half of your deck, right? So in the modern version, the more turbo based one, right? Sometimes you can draw a black ritual that will help you cast your Ad Naz, and you'll draw your Lion's Eye Diamond from your Underworld Breach combo, and you'll have your Derevi and not be able to cast it, right? So that's a little bit of the awkwardness. One of the reasons I tend to avoid the deck.
Some other negative things I would say, she's kind of squishy. She's what, like a 3/2, right? So she's pretty easy to get rid of. Board wipes are really bad for us. Getting rid of all of our little warriors who are helping us out is kind of awful for the end. So that's kind of just some stuff you got to worry about with her. But other than that, she's a pretty cool deck.
Yes, she is. Moving on to our favorite angsty teenager, we've got Kinnan. Kinnan's cracked. Thrasios is cracked. Powerful 2-mana commander that doubles your mana, and it has a fun activated playability. Playing interaction and using Kinnan's abundance of mana to bring out ridiculously large creatures that are going to win you the game. How do you win?
It's pretty cool. Kinnan and Basalt is like a very well known combo. Very good with Kinnan. Kinnan's ability is very strong. I'm gonna let Ian talk a little bit about that. But Kinnan and Basalt makes infinite colorless, and you can use Mirage Mirror for infinite colored mana as well. Or I guess like a finite number. Infinite's not really a thing, so we'll say that too. Another way to win with the deck is Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespout Tyrant. So those are pretty fun. I'm gonna let you talk about that too, because I hate talking about Kinnan as much as I like playing it. It makes my brain hurt. So we could talk about those, and then we'll get into the pros and the cons.
Yeah, so Kinnan is my most consistent tournament deck, I think, of all time. It is also relatively easy to learn from a concept standpoint, right? You are trying to get a bunch of mana, you're trying to flip over some big creatures, and you're trying to win with infinite mana. It's, as far as like pros, it's the most explosive mana deck in the format. It's like literally in green blue, it keeps up with Rograk's speed if you allow it to. Maybe with not as much consistency because you don't get those black rituals, but it does a ton of that. It has a really cool grind game. The flipping over of big creatures is not using the stack at all, right? So you just literally flip them over. Problem is they're a little bit random. That's one of the cons, is sometimes you can pump like 30 mana into Kinnan and get a bunch of elves and not get, giant creatures like Nezahal and Tidespout Tyrant and stuff like that.
Can you talk about Tidespout Tyrant and Hullbreaker, or how you do it?
Yep.
Just mana rocks.
Yeah, so some of the wins in the deck are definitely a little more subtle, right? So we talked about Basalt Monolith being able to make infinite colorless mana, and then there's a bunch of weird filters in the deck that allow that to turn into mana of any color. Then you have Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespout Tyrant loops, which basically, as long as you have mana rocks that net more mana than they cost, so as long as they're making mana as opposed to losing mana every time you cast them over and over again, think a Mana Crypt and a Soul Ring, for example. You can bounce one and then play it and tap it for mana, and then play the other one, bounce it back to your hand, and then just do that over and over and over and over and over again until you win the game. Yay.
Very cool. I would also say some big pros is Kinnan's literally 2 mana. He's 2 mana, very resilient commander. He gets killed once, no big deal. He's going to come back right away, which is really cool. The hard thing about the deck is that it deeply relies on your commander. If your commander's gone, I don't know what you really work on other than like, the dropping the big boys and having them doing things on the table is like the biggest thing. Sometimes you run out of your hand very fast too because of the amount of mana that you're making. It's really easy to go through all of your decks, so you're kind of just left without really anything in your hand, which also doesn't look that threatening to your opponent, so that could be a kind of a hard thing too. And then this just says loses to Curse Totem. Yeah, loses to Curse Totem. Pretty rough.
It's a really simple deck to understand as a concept, right? Make mana, drop big creatures, win game, right? But the subtleties and the nuances of the deck are why it's like one of the most inconsistent decks in the format, because you'll have, dozens of players playing it and not even get a single win on it. And then you'll have some players who are really good at playing it and they'll like go almost undefeated in a tournament, right? So it really is just like very low floor, very high ceiling deck. But for learning the format, for getting sort of the intricacies, all that kind of stuff, it's actually pretty straightforward and definitely like a very easy concept to grab. You want to flip big stuff and you want to kill your opponents with them.
I think it's also just important to like learn what those specific details are early, because that was the thing I had. I felt like I had so many options with Kinnan. I was like, ooh, I could do this win con, or I can get this big creature out, or when's the right time to get that creature out, or make a Kinnan activation, you know what I mean, other than just having a Seaborn Muse, like when's the right time to activate Kinnan, right? So those are kind of like the hard parts of playing the deck, but I think it's a really good one to like learn, especially because it is 2 colors. It's got literally a 1, or is it a 1-card combo with your commander? It was Basalt 2-card? They're 2 cards technically, right?
It's like
2, 3, whatever.
1.5.
It's 1.5, yeah, but because he cheats in the other stuff because he's so cheap, it's like 1.5. But it's very easy to understand, so that's a great beginner one too.
Yeah, its biggest pro is its biggest con, which is like it gives you so many options, but also it gives you so many options.
What Kenneth giveth, it taketh away.
Amen.
Next up on our list, we've got Tivit. This commander changed CEDH by allowing for a mid-range deck that also puts a real damage clock on the table. Its access to both the best cards in Esper and 1-card win condition have allowed it to be one of CEDH's most consistent decks. This is also a deck that I've just started playing.
And Tori
more
loves it
of.
because he's so cute and fun.
Yeah, he's really, really adorable. Whoever thought of his concept art just really killed it. Didn't make him scary at all.
Didn't you say you talked to Chris Renn about it at the booth, Ian? Didn't you talk to him about making Tivit? Was that you? You said something and he talked about the design of it.
Yeah, it was like a year and a half ago. And
Yeah,
I
you
do
don't
not
remember?
remember. No.
Okay. you asked him about it and he was like, I think he like referenced his own cat, like paws or something like that he said. I don't think his cat looks like that in the face. Tori's terrified.
Cat has a man's face.
Yeah.
Very concerning.
Yeah, he's Sphinxes scare me a little bit, alright? What am I gonna say?
It's one of my favorite arts of all time, and I know multiple people who are like, it's one of my least favorites of all time.
I love it. It's so bizarre and cute. It's really funky.
Goatee enjoyers in the chat.
So yeah, let's talk about how we win. Normally the most common thing I think you see and why it is so beginner friendly is time save. So it's a really easy win con with your commander. Also it does run Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pack, all that. So you do have those in your deck. You could do the damn thing with it. But yeah, I think it's a really good deck because your commander's beefy as hell. Really, really big. So even if like you're kind of stuck with just a Tivit on the board for a little bit, he's just gonna swing out at people and do the thing and make all of the what does he make? Clues and treasures. Yes, clues and treasures. So you're gonna make a lot of those too. Yeah, 6/6 flyer is really hard to get around, and he's got ward on him.
He appeals to a lot of like the people who've traditionally played that kind of like blue-black or Esper control and like 60 card formats, because he really is just like advantage engines, draws a bunch of cards, and interaction is like most of the deck, and then eventually you play the beefy boy.
Yeah, you play little stacks stuff.
Yeah,
Blind of Beauty,
a little bit,
Yeah.
some.
All right. Next up, we've got Godo, the Bandit Warlord, Lord of the Wars,
Lord of the Godos.
Warlord.
Most players who pilot CEDH Godo do so for one very important reason: it's fun. Godo Helm has always remained a staple of LGS's tournaments and CEDH battle boxes everywhere for its simple yet challenging gameplay and consistent competitive viability. Godo is often a recommendation for players new to CEDH and even new to the Magic the Gathering game. This is primarily due to the easy-to-understand count to 11 combo in the command zone.
I didn't write this one. It's from the primer, but it's really good. It's laid out really cute.
I feel like I'm hosting like
a game
Jeopardy
show
right now.
You're good. This is, in my opinion, the best CEDH deck primer ever. We will link it down below. It is just laid out so well for a beginner, and I highly suggest this if you want just like a monocolor deck to start the game with, to know what you're doing. Very easy. I highly suggest this because it is very easy to get into. When they say count to 11, it's pretty simple. So let's go over how we win. We're gonna cast Godo. First thing we're gonna do. Pretty good, right? 6 mana. Nice and easy. Is he 6 mana?
But it's only 6 red. That's it. Same color.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
What is that?
It's not that bad. Not like Tivit.
When Godo enters the battlefield, you're going to search your library for Helm of the Host and put it into the battlefield. You're going to equip Helm to the Host, paying 5, and move to combat. At the start of combat, Helm of the Host will trigger. Make a non-legendary copy of Godo, tutor an equipment to the battlefield if desired. Then declare the new Godo token as an attacker. The Godo token will trigger, untapping and creating an additional combat phase after this one. Proceed through combat, repeat step 4 through 7 for infinite combats and infinite Godo attacks. Boom. So yeah, this is a very easy to learn deck. That's a big pro to this. Can you count to 11? If so, you're good. Surprisingly resilient deck. It's just a great one. We see our friend Tony playing this all the time, and he's the worst because he's so good at talking with that deck. And it's for people who like don't look at Godo as like a threatening deck, it just pops off so quick, and it's really easy to get there with your win con as long as you're doing it. I think the con for this would be that you're in mono red, so your interaction is like kind of not the best. It's heavily affected by some stacks effects. Obviously, Adrenath Magistrate is really bad for us because we do rely on our commander for this. I don't really know what else we do besides it. There's like dual cast range, but does it do any combo-y stuff? No, it's like...
Sometimes it has historically run dual caster combos. It also sometimes runs breach combos. It really depends on the version of Godo you're playing. But traditionally, the Godo count to 11 stuff is the best stuff. That is the stuff you do. And luckily, you are in red, right? So like the Drannith problem is a problem, but at the end of the day, you play Lightning Bolt and Rending Volley and Pyrokinesis and could continue saying red cards for a long time.
Yeah, and it also says that while Null Rod was like a big concern, it's been pretty resilient against it, so that's pretty good. And yeah, there's a lot of cool artifacts you could play in this deck. There's a big hammer of his own, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so like one of the things the deck does well is like a very, very classic older Magic staples like Goblin Engineer and Goblin Welder. You can do a lot of like, oh no, my Helm of the Host got blown up. Well, I'll sacrifice my Mox Opal and now it's a Helm of the Host, and then just do a lot of switching in and out and in and out of the graveyard.
It's fun.
It is. It's nice, clean, simple. It's a really good way to learn the format because you kind of just got to put your little turbo hat on, and then you can learn counter spells later. Don't worry about it. Just play red decks.
That's true. We all love red decks here.
We do.
Yeah.
Red decks win.
Beep beep.
That's true. Red deck win. Beep beep.
Next up on our list, we have Winota, the baddie Boros queen.
I did write that.
You did write that one. Winota is one of the easiest transitions from casual to CEDH. This deck plays powerful stacks cards, weird little critters, and hopes to pack a punch. This deck sets out to play a disruptive game that can pivot into a combo to seal victory.
So we're in the like fringe-ish portion of our video. These decks that we're going to be talking about aren't the most like popular on the top ranking board right now, but I do think these are still good beginner decks. They're good ways to learn, and they're really fun, and you can still win. I just won a bunch of rounds with it recently. I had a top 16, a top 10, and a top 4 on Winota, so that's pretty good. So yeah, let's talk about how we win. So you do the combat, which is really fun. I love combat decks. You can win with lethal with our big creatures in combat, especially with a Blade Historian and Angras Marauders, my favorite card. Ian won't play it, but it's super good. It wins us the game. You can also have infinite combos with Kiki Jiki and Zealous Conscripts, or Rionia and Combat Celebrant, which I think comes up the most for me, which is really fun. Yeah, this deck is like, you know, not doing its best right now because it's really, really weak to Bowmasters. So all the cool little creatures that we're making in our tokens can disappear really quickly, which is really, really hard for me, and I'm emotional about it. Losing your commander, having her being taken away, her dying. She's 4 mana to cast. She's not too expensive, but once she dies a couple of times, it's you know, it's a big deal. Or if you can't get her out due to a Drannith or something, your game plan is just kind of delayed. Pros are, though, it makes Boros playable, which is not always an option. It cheats in both card and mana advantage, and you get some really cool indestructible humans, lots of cool effects for stacks pieces, but it plays around rule law really well, so you can do a lot of things because of your creatures. We did get some new cards that were really good recently. High Noon's been one of the best cards for the deck, so there has been good upgrades to the deck. Probably Ian hasn't touched his primer at all since this past year of new cards going into it, I would imagine.
Just the primer, but the deck list is up to date.
Yeah. So if you want a good primer, you can check out Ian's content for that. We love Winota. she's not the best right now, but we do like to play her. Anything you want to add to her?
Yeah, I mean, combat damage is like a really easy win condition for the deck for sure. It's playing stacks is definitely one of the hardest things to do in the format, but specifically with Winota, it crosses that line into like an aggro deck, right? And so therefore, when you're kind of getting into the format, it is kind of easy to go like, okay, some of the most straightforward game plan of like play non-humans, flip into humans, murder is a really easy way to get into it. And yeah, there are definitely subtleties and innovations and things that you can pick up over time about when to sequence things and all of that stuff. But at the very base level, even if you're just getting to the format, it is a good deck to just get you in the room where people are playing CEDH. And also, as far as CEDH decks are concerned, like it's not the most expensive by any means.
It's a very affordable CDH deck. I will also say some of the hardest things I've had to deal with playing this is when the right time to play stacks pieces, because obviously I want to slow down my opponents so I can get the win, but I don't want to completely lock them out from interaction if we need it, which is why I like cards like High Noon, because you could sacrifice the stacks piece, or Boromir you can remove and then still have room for interaction. And the other hardest thing for me is like I'm sometimes so nervous about sending out like my stacksy creature or something to attack, but most of the time the Winota flips are so good that you'll hit something that's going to buff them or make the damage go through. So later in the game, like if you're worried about losing a piece sometimes, like, and it's too valuable, don't do it. But if you think that something's like flexible for that, just swing it. Because I flipped Rick so many times off of things like that and be like, oh, never mind, my Esper Sentinel is real big and I'm fine. So that's kind of like the hard part about it.
I also find that it really appeals to players who like limited specifically, because like that combat I feel like is so important to like draft and sealed and stuff like that. And a lot of players who are really good at those particular skills are really good at like, oh, okay, if I send this many attackers at this player, I'm really good at like balancing that quick math of like take them out. Now this person's at this much, and I can do X, Y, or Z thing to them. And that part's pretty sick.
Yeah, the math is the hardest part for me. I'm so bad at math. But when I'm going through my combat, I'm like counting the math for each person's life total so I know where to put those attackers coming in, because math is a lot. Math is a lot, especially because all these new cards are coming in and buffing things and changing things. So, yeah, that's Winota.
That's Winota. Next up, we've got Temur Pirates. Temur Pirates, or commonly known as Temur, Malcolm, and Tana, is a creature combo CDH deck that often looks to be the most aggressive deck at the table. It's beat out only by the most all-in of ad nauseum decks. It's an incredibly flexible list that uses a range of powerful spells and creatures. I recently played this one.
Yeah, I think I took this from Cal's primary. The one that you played was Cal's deck too.
It was Cal's
Our
deck.
good buddy.
Cal's cards in my hand.
He's the pirate guy. Yar. So very easy win cons in this deck. Tori, you just did one recently. Do you remember what it was?
It was Kiki Jiki, and was it Carter Monitor? Yeah, it was.
Boom. She's got it.
That was it. It's all it took.
The other one is the Glinthorn Buccaneer, which is scary as soon as you see that as like an option for. Yeah, I would say that Tana's kind of useless in the deck. She's there for the color, right? But what is she really doing?
She did nothing.
She occasionally is sacrificed to an Eldritch Evolution.
Yeah, she makes you some Saprolings. Is that what she does? I don't know what the card says. So, no hate to her. She's lovely, but that's a big con of the deck. And another con would just be that there's not any card advantage in the command zone. And it's really susceptible to creature interaction because of specifically Orcish Bowmasters.
Yeah.
So what would you say some like additional pros and cons of the deck would be?
Yeah, so I mean, once again, pre Bowmasters, this was actually considered one of the best decks in the format, right? So it's got a very succinct, very clean game plan. Half of the deck is literally just meant to get you a Glinthorn Buccaneer on the battlefield, because it is a 1-card combo with your commander. The pivots of the deck still are not too bad. Some people run the Kiki lines, some people run Niv Mizzet lines. It's really depending on like kind of the individual list you're playing, right? But super consistent. Green has so many creature tutors, and this is the deck that just like you blink, you give it 1 second, and it's like, oh, there's a Glinthorn on the battlefield, right? So it definitely requires that sort of consistent respect from its opponents. And it's nice to really, if your opponents are taking a long time to set up, then hey, you got them. Downside, the One Ring did not do this deck any favors. The Glinthorn Buccaneer combo just uses damage, and turns out One Ring says no.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the nice parts about it is that the deck is full of creature combos, right, which are inherently resilient to counterspells because a lot of the best counterspells in the format hit instants and sorceries and enchantments and artifacts and stuff like that, as opposed to creatures, which just say, hey, like Force of Will or Pact of Negation, and that's not always the case.
All right. Next up, we've got Yuriko. Yuriko is flexible and can win through aggro attacks, control, or combos. You know her, you love her. Your opponents, they hate her. They're haters. Flip a big spell off the top to speed up your game. I love this deck. This deck's great.
This deck is great. This was I played it as a casual deck, and she's one of those commanders that was a mistake, but also is very strong. So like the Najeelas of the world, the Winotas, all those cards that feel very strong to play in your playgroup, I think transition over really well for CDH, and which is why I think she's a great one for this. So yeah, this one is a primer from Coco. That's what I got from, who's a wonderful Yuriko pilot, and their primer is really great, so we'll post that as well. So let's talk about those win cons. So you can burn them out with your commander, send out all those ninjas, do damage, and knock them out. You could also, the cool thing about Yuriko is when you do damage, you're going to flip over the top card, and everybody's going to take damage equal to the CMC on the card, which is pretty fun. They're tried and true, Thassa's Oracle, and Consultation, Can't Pact, they're in there, of course. You don't gotta worry about that. But let's talk about some pros and cons. Her non-existent commander tax, busted. Boom. Too strong.
Draenith does not stop your commander because as long as you have a creature going to combat, you can activate Commander Ninjutsu, which is not casting your commander. It is an activated ability from the command zone.
And you're always working towards your win con by attacking because that's just what the deck does. So it's very easy to just like get through and do that.
Yeah. Cons is the deck's definitely very slow. It is one of the slower decks in the format. Pros being it is like it's real easy to get it. You're just going to combat 90% of the time, trying to flip over some big stuff and burn them out. It's a little bit susceptible to just like not being able to win the fastest unless the burn plan is really working. And in general, it is really hard to recover from a board wipe.
I think she also has the Najeela problem where you see her, she's a really hard deck to politic with because, like, you can cheat things onto the top of your library for sure and do that, but unless you know what you're flipping, it's really hard to be like, let me get in with this damage, and who knows what you're going to take because there's no way to guarantee that. I think it's a really hard deck to politic with. Outside of that, too, it's a very mana-intensive deck, and if you're flipping over those big things that you can't spell, like, cast are just dead in your hand. So that's another thing with it, but I do think it's a fun deck. She's not expensive. It's not a very expensive deck to build as well if you want the physical cards, and obviously she's cheap to get out on the field and cheap to do it because she's broken. So she's a very good commander for that. Obviously, if she goes away, it's not the best thing if she's gone because you do rely on her heavily for your win con, right? But like, she's so good and resilient against that I don't think it matters.
Yeah, and like as you mentioned, cheap is actually a really good way to describe it because like it's one of the like as far as budget decks in the format, if you are playing a budget deck, it is like the $100 Yuriko deck is more competitive than most $100 decks I've ever seen in CDH.
We didn't put this on here, but I did want to mention Stella Lee real quick because that was like the first pre-com that we seen. We were like, ooh, this is a very good budget upgrade deck. I didn't write a lot of notes on her, but anything you want to say about Stella, I would greatly appreciate because I think people would be interested in her for a beginner deck.
Yeah, I mean, Stella is a pretty easy concept, right? You just count to 3 with as long as you get a spell that allows you to untap Stella and get an additional benefit, either pinging your opponents or drawing a card. You can literally draw your entire deck. Some of the really cool benefits are the fact that the deck pretty easily wins at instant speed, so that's like a pretty big benefit in its favor. The downside is it's extremely commander reliant, but also when you're starting the format, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, some of the subtleties of like when to cast your spells and stuff like that are definitely things you learn over time, but at the end of the day, it's pretty easy walk of the 1, 2, 3, draw my whole deck, win the game.
Yeah, and I will say, like, obviously, like, out of the box, she's pretty strong. Like, we played her in one of our gameplay episodes, and she was very strong. But a lot of the, like, not a lot of the staples, but some of the staples, like those 1 mana, 2 mana, like, spells that you're going to cast, your ponders, whatever, they're already in the deck. So if you have it and you want to start making upgrades, it's a great place to start and go through it. So these decks are going to be some that are highly requested to talk about, but are a little bit harder for beginners to play. Obviously, there's people who are really good at picking up things. We're going to talk about Sisay. Zab's picked up Sisay right away because she's really good at puzzles and that sort of thing. But they are not the most beginner-friendly. You probably want to play them around a little bit or try some other decks that we mentioned earlier and then try these out. I think that's a good suggestion. So what do we got up, Tori?
Well, we have everyone's favorite Rograkh. Vroom Vroom, the explosive CDH deck hopes to go as fast as possible, turbo out their win con. Ka-chow.
I love Lightning McQueen.
There's no paragraph under the other ones. Rograkh is what many consider to be a turbo ad nauseum strategy, but what it really is a consistent best broken cards: Underworld Breach, the Wheel Effects, Necropotence, oh my, and highly interactive deck while being surprisingly resilient. I'm pretty sure this deck won on turn 1 recently, right? Am I wrong? Yeah, I feel like this is like I actually am playing the game and no one else is. Cool.
Ian also played a tournament recently where he kept 2 cards and played against a Rograkh? No, a Rograkh.
2 Rograkh, blue farm.
2 Rograkh and a blue farm, and you were like, you were playing Kinnan, so it was fine that you went to 2 cards in general, but there was like an early wheel, so you just got like a fresh 7 right away, because that's what the deck likes to do. They like to wheel.
Yeah.
I do not care for this deck. However, I love Lil Roger, he's perfect, so I get why he's really good. He's literally 0 mana to get out, so it makes all of your free interaction for things like that pop out early, which is really fun. It's a really fast deck if you want to go fast. This is definitely, like Tori said, Room. It's literally a Room deck. And yeah, it turns on a lot of those cards that you need early, like I said, like your Deflecting Swats or your free interaction spells and your Fierces and things like that. So that's a positive thing of him. I don't really think anybody plays Silas ever.
Very rarely.
Yeah. But we're gonna let you talk about these harder decks because I don't like to, so we're gonna let you talk about Rograkh a little bit and then get into the other ones.
Yeah, so if you want to play a fast deck in the format, it is the fastest by far. It turns on your Fierce Guardianships, your Deflecting Swats, your Flare of Duplications, right? Like all of these fast, broken, interactive pieces, it does turn on. It's also the easiest way to get a creature you can sacrifice, right? So if you're using a card like Culling the Weak, which is like 1 black to make 4, but you have to sack a dude, well, guess what? You have 1 to sack right away, or your Mox Amber becomes a Mox Ruby just right away, able to be turned on. So Rog is the speed of the format. It is recently gotten a lot of consistency printing, so now we have a second Necropotence and Necrodominance. It got Flare of Duplication to give it another free counter spell that it didn't need, and so it's definitely a fast, explosive, consistent deck. It's been getting a lot more tutors lately, and it generally is just the quickest thing to be doing in the format, and a lot of players who like less of the social aspect of the format and like more of the broken cards aspect of the format really like this deck.
I mentioned Sisay a minute ago. She's a really cool commander, very toolboxy. So I'm gonna let you talk about her. Because
I
that's
don't
not
have a cool intro for her.
no.
Making one up.
Go ahead.
Fuck dumb. H to the Izzo, S to the Sisay. That's right. I said it. I can be corny too. This one plays every single color in CEDH as well, and you get to put permanents into play with Sisay's ability.
Did you think I wrote corny stuff?
Ka-chow?
Yeah, it's Lightning
We're getting
McQueen.
corny if we're saying
It's Lightning
I
McQueen.
know.
What is corny about that? You love him.
Did I say I don't like corny?
You just said it was
Did
corny.
I say I
though.
don't like corny?
Oh my gosh.
That's the question. Look at me and tell me that you don't think I enjoy corny.
Anyways,
Anyway.
take it away.
Sisay is a really fascinating deck. It is for all the puzzle nerds out there. If you like solving complicated problems, Sisay is the deck for you, which is why I truly adore this deck. It's also been called Binder Bin deck, which is just like, hey, do you like that random legendary creature that came out in M15 that has no use? Guess what? It has one here. It wins with a line of planeswalkers and enchantments that cost like a quarter a piece. It's a really weird deck, but it's also super powerful because it can often win without ever putting a spell on the stack apart from its commander. I've often gone on record saying land drops and Sisay is a win condition. So it's definitely very strong in that sense. It has a lot of consistency in the format, and its ability to not only win without casting spells, but win at instant speed makes it an extremely deadly threat for the format. So Sisay is very powerful, very consistent, has 5 color options, and yeah, mulligan for your opposition agents if you're going against this deck, or just play a fast deck and try and get in underneath it.
I just want to say Ian does have a really good deck tech on this deck if you want to check it out on his channel. Also, a kind of like con for the deck is losing Sisay, right? Because she's kind of your entire game plan, I would say, unless there's anything else you want to mention. But I also want to mention the best card ever is Bloom Tender in the deck. I highly believe that card is really strong. It might not be the best card ever, but I see it, and when Ian plays Bloom Tender and Sisay, I get really scared because the card's really good and it allows you to do all the things you need to do. So
I'm going to believe you. It's the best card
It's
ever
good.
made. Boom. Sisay gets a boom.
She gets a boom. That's everything we're talking about today. Again, we're going to be at MagicCon playing CEDH all day Friday, teaching people how to play. And then, of course, we have other resource guides here on our YouTube channel, and we'll be posting more in our description down below if you want to follow through on any of those. We'll have the deck list primers, intro to CEDH, all that good stuff.
That's right. And if you want to... Why are you laughing at me? This is my HGTV. Oh, God. Yep, that's all the decks we have today. Fucking Ian, fuck off. Stop laughing at me. It's not funny. It's not funny. Thank you for watching Scry Babies.
Or is it
Disney Channel. All right, let's see. That's all the decks we have on the list today. If there's any other decks that you started out playing with, let us know in the comments. Let us know what your favorite beginner CEDH deck is, or resources that you found useful too, or decks you want to see us play on the show.
That's true. We need more decks to play on the show. Please tell us.
Please tell us more decks to play on the show. I don't care what it is. I'll play it.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff that we need to try out too. And again, if you want to check out Ian, he does have a cool YouTube channel, ComedIanMTG. He's a CEDH coach, and he actually does this for a living, so he can go through these decks with you. He can also help you build a weird fringe thing if that's what you want to do. Anything else you want to plug? I think that's probably good, but...
No, yeah, just find me ComedIanMTG@gmail.com if that's of interest to you.
Bye!
See you later.